All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going today? It's a beautiful day down here in Florida. I hope everybody up north is doing well. I understand that there's a bit of a storm up there. So stay warm and safe while you're out and about, if you're out and about. But otherwise, it's beautiful down here in Florida. So I don't miss it. I'm from Chicago, for those of you who don't know, and I'm happy to be out of there when it's this time of year. So anyway, let's get right into it. I've got a batch of questions here for you. I'm super excited about it. Let's just get rolling. All right, first question comes from Erica Wilkinson. How do I think bigger about my business? My company does very well as it stands, but I'm trying to change my perspective a bit. I feel I'm looking from the ground up and not from the top down. I find myself working more in my business versus on my business, building it. What are some techniques you have used to guide this process? We are a professional luxury cleaning company. We have incorporated hospitality, tourism management to create a unique system that allows you to experience the difference. Okay, cool. Great question. I like that you use the phrase in my business versus on my business. For those of you who haven't heard that before, it's a clear distinction. When you're working in your business, you're doing the work, you're with your hands, you're building the product, you're doing all of the stuff yourself. When you're working on your business, you're figuring out how to move it forward, how to get it to the next level. And Erica's question is about where do you, how do you spend the time needed to move the business really forward from that on the business perspective. So my advice on that for myself, like kind of the way that I do it, is I just take where I'm at right now, and I'm not a huge Grant Cardone fan, but I do kind of like his 10x idea. The idea is take where you're at right now, multiply it by 10, and then think about what you'd have to change in order to get to that 10. So what would have to change operationally? What would have to change from a sales perspective? What are the different things that you'd have to put in place right now in order to do 10 times the amount of revenue that you're currently doing? That's a good place to kind of start from just kind of like a conceptual perspective. And then once you've kind of got that picture in your mind of how it's supposed to go, one of the things that I always point out to people very quickly is that if you are working in the business a lot, like you're spending your full day, like 8 hours a day, 10 hours, 12 hours, whatever you're doing, you do have to start to figure out sooner than later how to buy yourself more time. And when I mean buy, I mean literally it does cost money to buy yourself more time, to get someone else to do at least some portion of that operational stuff that you're doing so that you don't have to, so that you have more time to work on the business and not be exhausted at the end of the day, which is like the worst time to be trying to think about the future, is when you've really had a full day and your brain is not functioning properly. So you'll have to imagine the 10 times bigger. Start to think about how you're going to buy yourself some time in the short term. How are you going to give yourself that little bit of freedom in order to build that, to have that space, and then make that space like safe and consistent. So like what I mean by that is that this isn't something you do once and then you just write it down and then you put it in a drawer and forget about it. Although there is some research that shows that goal setting like that does actually have an influence. But I found that you have to schedule it just like you would any other part of your day. So like you would actually schedule your working on the business time and do that consistently. So whether it's a weekly meeting with a mentor, or it's a weekly meeting with a friend or a key employee, or even just by yourself, make a formal process around it. There's a lot of different tools that are good that kind of help move those things along. Traction, EOS, it is Entrepreneur's Operating System, is a great kind of method for keeping at first just yourself and then eventually your whole company on track to make sure you're working towards those bigger goals. Scaling up is another version of that. There's all kinds of different ways of approaching it, but the point is, regardless of which flavor you choose, that you do choose a flavor and you carve out the time and make it part of your regular routine. So so just to summarize then, I guess it's what does it look like 10 times bigger? What has to change? What are the things you can do to buy yourself that extra time that you need to be able to dedicate a regular cadence of working on the business? I would say on a weekly basis at minimum. If you can't get yourself at least a once a week bit of time, even if it's just an hour, you need to be able to do that. So, and then if you want to choose one of these more formal systems, or if you want to just, start on your own and see where you end up, that's a good place too. It's more carving out the time and getting the ball rolling. And if you need help from like a business model perspective, reach out to me. I'm happy to walk through just kind of an overview kind of thing. We'll just spend an hour and just kind of talk about it from a high level and see where you end up. Okay, that is good. Next one is from Law Jackson. I could use some help staying on course while I build up my revenue. What are some affordable ways to stay accountable with my sales process implementation? Thanks to 8 months of mentorship, I have a basic sales process, a short list of vendors, and a project manager in training. I thought sales was my biggest problem. Then I thought it was my limited capacity. Now I know it's my poor system of processes. I'm figuring out my process from sales through to production. It's not perfect, but it works. The real pain is removing myself from the different stages and still getting quality results. You may remember that I'm transitioning away from the freelance mode. It's still pretty much just me. I have a loose plan with 100 little things to do each week. What are some ways to implement process, improve my ability, and delegate, and develop sales? Do you think an accountability group would be helpful? Yeah, I think that, again, whenever you're trying to accomplish something, it doesn't hurt to have someone to be accountable to. Again, whether it's, it sounds like you've gone the mentor route. I know you haven't, I worked with you a little bit. I think that's super critical as anyone moves forward. And in this particular case too, the more that you can kind of create some support for yourself so that you don't feel like you're totally in it on your own, that is definitely the way to go. Like, here's a good example. So I have on my phone here, I have a friend who lives in Nebraska, in Omaha, Nebraska, and we were introduced through Entrepreneurs Organization at the MIT program 3 years ago, over 3 years ago now, I guess it was. We were in a program together at MIT, and we connected. And one of the speakers who we saw, one of the guys who was kind of like talking about his method of accountability, basically gave everybody a assignment to identify 3 things that would move the needle, right? So the 3 kind of things, the active things we can do every day. That was the key. It's something I could do every day that would move the needle for us. And then they gave us an accountability buddy. It was just random. And I happened to get my friend Eric, who I now consider my friend, because I have texted him and he has texted me every single day for the last 3 years and some change. I guess it'll be 4 years in the summer. And we don't have any plan to stop. We've even accomplished things, and then we've changed the goal, and now we're reporting on other things to each other. And we do that every single day before we go to sleep. Generally, before I go to sleep is what I do. He does it a little bit earlier in the day. But we just give a report. We have 3 things, 2, 3, 1, 3, 0, 3, just to say, did I do it or did I not do the thing that I said I was going to do on an active basis every single day? So even something simple like that, just to keep your mind in tune with what is supposed to be happening, so that way then when you're getting distracted by all these other things, you get that daily rhythm that reminds you, if like, oh, 0, 3 today, oh, another 0, 3 today, oh man, I'm not doing anything like that I need to be doing to actually move myself forward. I'm just running around in circles. So yeah, whatever it is, like that's a method that I used and I still do use. But again, yeah, mentorship, accountability groups, anything that kind of keeps you focused on the business, not in the business, so you can move forward. All right, next question. Bob Guerra. How do you know when to call it quits on business ideas? Over the past decade, I've launched 5 or 6 businesses, set up e-commerce sites, obtained sales, then stopped when I didn't believe I could turn a profit. Now with my current venture, I'm in the same spot, and I'm not sure if I should push forward or switch gears to one of my other entrepreneurial ideas. This is a great question. Okay, so first things first, as entrepreneurs, we have a lot of ideas. We see a lot of opportunity. And one of the things that we're very guilty of, I guess you could say, is the word, is we do chase shiny objects sometimes, right? The grass is always greener, like, ooh, that looks like that'd be fun, or that would be, that has more potential, or whatever. So you want to avoid that, right? So you don't want to chase shiny objects, but pivoting and knowing when to quit is also a super valuable skill. One that I feel like I've become quite good at, because I push things way too long sometimes. And so I asked the same question to Jeff Hoffman, who is the guy who invented those ticketing machines at the airport and has billions of dollars because of it. And he also started Priceline.com and a bunch of other things. So I asked Jeff that exact question one time when we were together, because I was curious, because he was recounting stories of his many successes. And I said, you're talking about all the success you've had. I'm sure you've had plenty of failures too. How did you know when you had a failure instead of a success on your hands? And I said, when do you know how to quit? The exact question. And his comment was, I quit when I'm all out of ideas. So meaning, like, as long as you have another idea of what you can do with the thing you're already working on, keep trying those ideas. Don't be afraid to change. Don't be afraid to pivot the idea. Don't be afraid to refocus. But if you're completely out of ideas and the well is dry, don't go grasping at straws. Don't keep doing the same thing hoping that something's going to change. Don't go into that codependent relationship with your business where one day it's going to change, just that whole thing. It's, well, maybe it's not going to change. Like, really evaluate that. And if you're all out of ideas on how to move it forward and you want to try another business, then try the next thing, or try the next opportunity. That's I found that to be a good lesson for myself, because as I become more fluid to new ideas and not overly committed to one path or another, I found much easier paths quicker than the opposite. So yeah, if you've still got ideas on how to push forward, then push forward as fast as you can, as hard as you can, and commit. If you're totally out of ideas on this one and you want to go on to the next one, then go on to the next one. That's what Jeff said to me, and I now say it to you. Okay. Mary Rentacalio. How do I determine how to pay someone to do work for me? Business description. Okay. It's not highlighted. I have a therapy machine for horses and have now found a person to hire to use it. What would be the best salary alternative? Hourly paid or per treatment? Our treatment is 30 minutes for $50. The person knows a lot of people and is located in a training center for horses, and there is demand right away. I'm a veterinarian currently working with small animals as a contractor. Permanent resident sponsoring process ongoing. Okay, Mary. So you're talking about a business model, right? And so it depends on a couple different things. If you're charging $50, what I would do, which sounds actually very cheap for horse-related equine business stuff, because that stuff is always super expensive. So very reasonable price there. So I guess it depends on what your volume is, I suppose. If you're taking somebody to an event and you've got people back, you've got clients back to back, and that machine's going to run solid for 8 hours, well, then you're probably better off paying the person hourly. If it's more sporadic and you're going to have some downtime, then you're probably better off paying them based on a per treatment sort of session. The thing I like about a per treatment is that it does give you that flexibility to, assuming that the person will go along with it, to kind of like let that person eat up the dead time. So you pay them a little bit more per session, and then you also can lock in your your labor cost is variable, directly related to your how much revenue you're doing, right? So you could just choose a percentage. So if you're getting $50 per half hour, so that's $100 per hour. So if you gave them $12.50 per half hour, that's 25% of your gross costs or gross revenue. Then that's a direct cost of 25%. Great. Like that's like, I like to work kind of just on what I want it to be first. Like I just do it on a spreadsheet first and do what's it worth to me. I don't really care what it's worth to somebody else. What is it worth to me? How would I set this up? And then I would say, like, okay, 25% goes to the direct labor. That leaves me with 75%, and then I'm going to have to spend so much on sales and marketing. Let's call that 15 to 20 or 25% more. Okay, now I've got 50% left. That's my gross profit to cover my SG&A, which is kind of like my overhead and everything like that. I mean, I already took some of the sales out on the first part, but point is, and then there's a profit, right? So you can just calculate all that stuff out based on what you want it to be, and then see if it works. Like then take it to market, and just like you do with revenue pricing, you say, hey, will people pay this price? And you test it. You could do the same thing on the employee side too. You can try to offer some low number or some deal that's really great for you, like that you're happy with. And if there's enough of a labor pool to, that you can draw from at that cheaper price, it's just supply and demand, then don't overpay. And so like in this case, that's how I would approach it. I would just map it all out. Here's my revenue, $50 per half an hour. I'm going to spend this much on direct labor. I'm going to spend this much on sales. I'm going to spend this much on my oversight, and I'm going to make this much profit on each session. And then I'm going to take it to market and see, okay, well, $50, I could actually get more than $50. I can get $60. That makes a difference. Or I can't get somebody to work for $12.50. I got to pay them at least $20 per session. So how does that affect everything? Like, so I just map it out and then just take it from there. Next question. Zach Williams. How can we differentiate ourselves and build a moat in a saturating market? We sell houseplants online and provide a wealth of plant care tips and information. We were fairly early mover in the trend, but the market is saturating and competition is increasing, and therefore the cost of a new customer is increasing. We have been focusing on producing content, increasing our returning customer rate, and lowering our prices. But we are looking for some other ways to build a moat and differentiate ourselves in the market. This is a great question. So everybody wants a moat, right? We hear Warren Buffett talk about moats all the time, right? That's one of his key words. A moat is a tricky thing because a moat truly has to be something that is not easily replicatable. Now, if you're Warren Buffett and you're investing in American Express, and American Express has 50 million members and a brand that kind of is like that's been developed over these, whatever it's been, 70 years or whatever, that's a moat. That's hard to recreate, right? But if in all of our businesses, like any of us, mere mortals, as it were, it's harder for us to get that sort of moat. Our best bet when we're trying to develop a moat is coming back to a business model again. What is the business model that really is different? So if we're good at marketing and we're kind of good at working digital ads, and we can kind of make a spread between what it costs us to advertise and what we're able to sell and our margin on our products and all that, that's all good. But honestly, that will never be a moat, because that's really, especially because the bidding systems online just eventually bid up the prices of everything, as you're suggesting, to the point where it's really not profitable for anybody, and it's really just people throwing money at stuff, or they have to give more and more margin away to even play in the game. So, which is just economics. That's how it works. So if you're really wanting to build a moat, the best thing to do is to think in terms of network effects. How is it that you can create more value for your customers because they're with you, and that as you get bigger, then they benefit from that? And so anyone else coming into the game it has to play catch up, and the bigger you get, the more extra benefit you can give to your customers that someone coming in new can't just buy. They need that scale in order to function, or to be able to compete with you directly. So, but it comes down to business model. Honestly, being hyper focused on your products and who you're selling to helps a lot with that, because if you're selling too broadly, it's very hard to be special. If you get laser focused and you know what your business model is and you know who you're marketing to, getting very, very specific. That way, then when someone else enters the market again, if you own that niche, if your brand is what's known, then it's harder for somebody coming in to come along and say me too, because they're not me too, because you're the one who your market trusts. So yeah, I think that's a big part of it, and establishing cool business models and new ways of thinking. Like, for example, just something that ran through my head was like the people that do the corporate art stuff, where they have like all this art, and then they pay a subscription, like corporate people pay a subscription to change out the art on a regular basis. I mean, I don't know how those businesses are doing now, but change out the art like in their offices just to kind of keep things interesting. Every quarter they'll change it out. I mean, that's an interesting model, right? That's different than just like, hey, buy art, but it's more of an art as a service. And so, I mean, I could see that happening with something like this, like if there's like a plants as a service kind of solution, like, right? So that would be unique. And then you also get reoccurring revenue, which is the number one thing. If you're just selling one-offs and then you're trying to get your customers to buy again at some point in the future without any like real reason for them to do so, trying to create a recurring model where they're paying a subscription fee and then you're delivering something to them on a monthly basis is a much better model than just selling onesie twosies as you go. And then, of course, again, it creates brand loyalty. It creates that relationship that as you get bigger, you can offer more service and better things, and the customer just keeps paying the same or just a little bit more because your scale grows. That's the kind of stuff that really builds a moat. That doesn't take 70 years and 40 million customers like American Express. Cool. That's a good question. Brandon Phillips, what type of advertising should we start when selling directly to homeowners? My name is Brandon. I own a small two-man HVAC company. I'm an active member in BNI and rely solely on word-of-mouth referrals for new business. We are grateful for the work received, but also ready to grow this business and take it to the next level. At this point, we could easily handle more work. After 16 months in business, I'll admit every dollar counts. Any feedback or advice on how we should approach advertising is very much appreciated. All right, cool. So advertising is a tricky one, right? So my recommendation is whatever you do, make sure that you can attribute the results of the advertising to an actual customer or lead. I think the thing that the mistake a lot of people make is that they get pitched from some agency or ad group or something like that, hey, great, how great this is, and we're going to reach all these people, and they write a big check, and then the check is written and they pay the money and the stuff goes out, whatever it is, and then they have no idea if it did anything. There's no way to track it. It just goes out in the world, and then maybe it worked. I don't know. Hey, the phone rang an extra 3 times this week. Was that it? So first thing is make sure whatever you spend money on, you have a way of tracking that it came back. Because if you can't track that it came back, you don't know, and you can't do more of it if it does work, and you can't stop doing it if it doesn't. Like you'll drive yourself crazy. So that's kind of a general recommendation. As far as HVAC goes, or any of that sort of stuff, there's a couple of things that I know of specifically that are interesting about that. Is there are companies that do pay-per-performance in that space, where they're literally they're call centers and they're email people and they're digital people, and they will do pay-per-performance type stuff. So you don't pay anything until they deliver you somebody who wants to hire you. Now the first job, I mean, there might be a lot of cost associated with when they do deliver that person. I don't know what the details are, but I do know that they do that, which I always like pay-per-performance, because then I'll pay a lot to get a new customer, like if you're handing me a new customer, because then I can try to keep them and do a good job for them and build that relationship. Because then all that risk and all that figuring it out is on somebody else. So that's something to look into. I can recommend somebody if you reach out to me. I think I know somebody, not I think, I do know somebody here in Florida who does it nationally, nice sized company. So that's one option. The other option that you might consider is direct marketing, either through mail, and I'm not a huge mail fan, but I know that some people are very successful with it. I also am invested in a company that does peer-to-peer texting, which kind of operates like direct mail, except it's cheaper and much more targetable because it's literal texting. So like if we can identify who your target market is either by geography or even by their geospatial behavior, meaning like where the person is. Like for example, if they're at the Home Depot, I'm just using an example, and we want to just send text to only people at Home Depot, we could do that, and we could do that in real time too. So that's something else to think about. It's kind of like those more creative approaches, because in your business, I'm guessing, it's probably about finding the person very much at the point where they need you, like where they're having some sort of issue. So thinking through how to identify their issue and what do they do, or where are they, or what are they searching for online or whatever at the point they're having that issue, and then you put all your resources into communicating with them at that exact moment. Because when they're in that buy mode, they're probably in an immediate buy mode. And then also another thing too, is again, if reoccurring revenue is great too, if you can convert those into contracts, which I know a lot of HVAC people do. They have maintenance contracts and stuff like that. I mean, that's a good thing to focus on, because if you build a business on onesie twosies, again, you do a good job, they might not need you again for 10 years. But if you have a contract of some kind that is somewhat, that is something that happens every month or every year, or every quarter, then you build that recurring revenue, and now you build enterprise value in your business too. If you're just onesie twosies, when you go to sell it, if you go to sell it, you'll maybe get 1 or 2 times cash flow. Where if you've got a nice solid recurring revenue and a brand, you can get huge money for that, especially if you're a bigger company at that point. So anyway, yeah, advertising is always an interesting endeavor. Next question. Adam Drake. Why isn't my phone ringing off the hook if I show up on Google several times on first page for my relevant search terms? I own a registered investment advisory firm. The 2 towns we are in have populations of 15 to 20,000 people. Could it just be that we are in small markets? Yes, we do get leads off web search, but most of our leads come from word of mouth, the Nextdoor app, and referrals. For financial firms like ours, should I be concerned with numbers of leads from web, or should we focus more on outbound sales strategies in your opinion? Thank you for saying in your opinion, because by the way, this is always all my opinion. I don't know. I mean, I do. I have good ideas about it, I think, and I think I have some things that could work. But in my opinion, yes is the answer. I see very little. I know people that make lots of money with, Google and search engine optimization and AdWords and all that stuff. I personally have had very little success with that, and I've seen more people who have more success with, again, much more focused and outbound activities, not waiting for somebody to just show up from an ad. And it is a small market, 15 to 20,000 people. How many of them are searching for your service on a weekly basis, really? And then how many of them, if you're on the first page, but there's 12 other listings, even if you're in the top 3 spots, how many is that? It's probably not that many. A good solid outbound campaign, I think, is critical in your business and in many others. So there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. Again, you can use direct mail, direct texting, phone calls. And from an efficiency perspective, it's just about identifying who your right fit is, where do they hang out, what do they do, what do they like, and then figuring out how you communicate with them on a regular basis and in a cost-effective way. I mean, this is marketing, this is sales, this is just, every business is dealing with that all the time. So yeah, I wouldn't fret. And I also like to see that it does sound like you've got good word of mouth in the Nextdoor app. That's great, and you've got referrals. That's great too. How do you scale that up a little bit, or how do you move into the next market over just a little bit? Doing what you already have done. Like if you're successful with those methods in this market, does it? Again, I don't know. Maybe there's a geographical limitation, but can you just shift over, the next town over and do the exact same thing, and then shift over and do the next the exact same thing. I mean, honestly, that's how Yelp, Uber, anything that's like kind of geographically based does it, right? They succeed at sales and marketing and understanding what their cost per acquisition is in a one tight little area, and then they move to the next town, then move to the next town, then move to the next town, and before you know it, they're all across the world. So yeah, being hyper focused on outbound activities in a local area, and knowing what your cost per acquisition is the name of the game. That's it. Easy peasy. Not easy peasy, but theoretically easy. Easy to understand. All right, next question. Abraham Marcos. At what point am I crossing the line between boss and employee? I need some advice. I recently hired a new employee. We've been paying him day to day to get them back on his feet. Recently, we decided to have him go full time and pay him on payroll. I've already given him a pay advance, and today he asked if I would be interested in buying some HVAC material left over from a side job he did a while back. I know this would help him out a bit, but at what point am I crossing the line between boss and employee? I'm really not sure how I feel about this, and I want to make the right decision and keep it professional. Okay. All right, Abe, here's the deal. If the employee is truly doing everything that he can do to move himself forward, and you're just helping facilitate that, and it's not costing you money. I mean, this isn't a charity that you're running, right? So if it's the same difference to you, and if you pay him a week early or you do something like that, and you can help him out, and it doesn't put a strain on you, then go for it, right? Like, that's okay. If he's truly bettering himself. If you're becoming an enabler and now he's becoming dependent on you, then in that case, I would say that you might have to pull the professionalism boss employee thing. I don't think there's a hard rule on that, because I've known lots of people who have helped people buy houses, who've helped people buy cars, who've helped people with all sorts of financial stuff. That, a spouse gets sick and then the boss pays all the medical bills. Like, people do all kinds of nice things for each other in the boss-employee relationship. So I don't think that's really the issue. I think it comes from where the intention is from his part, and where it's going. Like, buying some leftover materials. Hey, if that was brought up to me, I'd be like, okay, like, if that might be a profitable deal for me, right? Like he's got these leftover materials that aren't worth anything to him, and I can buy them for cheaper than what I can buy retail, and then I actually make money on the deal. That sounds good to me. So I think it really just depends on, like, that it's not putting you out in any way. You mentioned in advance, don't get strung out too far on this quote unquote advance. It's not really an advance. You just gave him money. He probably won't give it back to you. Like, eventually you'll try to catch up, and maybe you will if he stays around long enough. But have no delusions that it's quite possible that he could quit tomorrow and you'll never get that money back. So be careful on how far you advance money. So yeah, it just depends on intention, I guess, and of what his intentions are, and how, and to make sure you're not enabling, but actually helping somebody move forward. Because that's all good. If you're helping somebody, then great. Do whatever feels right to you in that case. That's my thought. Okay. Oh, look at this. We're already on the last one. Paulina Beck. How do you explain the difference in pricing between CFO level services and bookkeeping services to clients? I run a full service accounting firm, and I think I'm potentially undercharging my clients for CFO services. My clients fall between $100,000 and $500,000 in revenue, and in my monthly CFO retainer, I cover bookkeeping, tax prep, tax planning, cash flow analysis, and financial consulting with 4 meetings during the month for $750. Interesting. So your question was, how do you explain the difference in pricing between CFO level services and bookkeeping services to clients? So from my perspective, like at first glance, just knowing only what's written on this page, $750 for all of that seems extremely inexpensive. Very, very inexpensive. we were, I mean, like a basic, I always think of bookkeeping service just alone at, you know, $1,500 to $2,500 a month, not to mention all the tax prep and all that stuff. And 4 meetings during the month. That, I don't know what that entails, but 4 meetings, is that an hour? Is that a half an hour? Because then you divide your 750 over all that time. I'd be really curious. That might be a good test for you, actually. Take that $750 and divide it over the amount of hours that you spend on a client on a monthly basis to do all that work, or maybe over the course of a year, and see what your hourly rate is. I'd be curious to know what that is. And if it's not high enough, then you're not charging enough. But to your question, what is it? How do you explain the difference between these things? Well, if your clients are pushing back on the pricing of all of that stuff, then you might just want to get different clients. Like, I would think that even if you're only making between 100 and 500,000 in revenue, $750 a month, which is less than $10,000 a year, seems very, 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 very reasonable. And so, yeah, I would just say make sure you're talking to the right clients, because it shouldn't take a lot of explaining that all that stuff is rolled into one monthly fee. That they understand that that's actually a very reasonable price, and that it's a lot of work. I mean, you can even quote your hourly rate. I don't like quoting hourly rates because it's just not a good relationship to have with people. It's better to have just like is this worth this amount or not? Because it is either worth that amount or not. It doesn't matter what the hourly rate is, because if you lower the hourly rate, it could just take you can work it. You could just take 3 times longer, and then you get the same money anyway. So hourly rates, from your perspective, is valuable. From the client's perspective, it really just has to do with, is this a valuable service or not to them? One thing I do like when I'm trying to illustrate value is I always figure out, well, what would it take for the client to do this themselves, especially on the bookkeeping side, right? Or to hire somebody else in-house. So maybe when you do the exercise of how many hours does it take to complete all this stuff, you can say, all right, me doing all this and I know what I'm doing, or if I'm hiring somebody, I know what they're doing. Like, we know what we're doing. We're very efficient at it. It takes us, 10 hours a month. So it's $75 an hour. So it takes us 10 hours a month. If you, Mr. Client, tries to do this, it's going to take you 30 hours a month. And that 30 hours that you're spending goofing around on this, you're probably making mistakes. You're probably paying too much in taxes then, because you're not doing the proper planning and getting everything organized. So you're already spent more on lost opportunity in terms of your tax planning by doing it yourself. Like that sort of stuff. Like really kind of talk to the idea of value and the fact that you're probably saving them 2-3 times what they're paying just because of the tax planning and the opportunity cost of, because you're doing the bookkeeping and they're not having to do that, they can go out and make more sales. You can say to them, what is it when you're out making sales? Oh, well, when I'm out selling, I can sell something for $5,000. Could you do that once a month because you got an extra 10 hours a month worth of stuff? Oh yeah, I can do an extra $5,000 because I got an extra 10 hours. Well, good. I just made you $5,000 by taking this off your plate. So it's always a conversation of what's the client's opportunity cost if they were going to do this themselves to save your fee. You got to point out to them where they're spending the money otherwise in terms of time or lost opportunity. Yeah, that would be my approach. I wouldn't focus too much on the service itself. I'd focus very much on the lost time relative, or the gained, tax advantages versus just them fuddling along and doing it themselves. So, okay, I think that is about it. I am wrapped up for today. Thank you, everybody, for listening to me. I'm always excited to talk to you guys. So reach out through AO if anybody wants to connect. I'm always happy to connect and spend a little bit of time with anyone for any reason. I love this stuff, and this is what I do. I've got a lot of cool things going on that I enjoy, other businesses and such, and I always want to hear about what other people are doing as well. So that is it. Have a good end of 2020, and we'll see you all after the holidays. Happy holidays. We'll see you all in 2021. Bye.